this episode of After the Honeymoon, the Smoochers find themselves in a familiar cycle. Every day begins and ends, just like every other day. Until
Let's get the candles.
Where are the candles?
When was the last time we ate by candlelight?
I don't know. But I remember what happened afterward.
Oh, Scott.
All right. Well, welcome again to worship today. We're so glad that you're here. My wife Debbie and I were driving recently in the Capital District, and we noticed a couple that was walking on the side of the road, and we were struck by kind of their body language and the expressions they had on their faces. The wife, to be honest, looked like she could put her head through a brick wall. She seemed to be so angry, so upset. Her jaw was set. Her movements were rigid as though she was just incredibly angry. And the husband seemed to be keeping his distance from her. He was kind of far away, and his movements were also kind of rigid, but he had a weird look on his face, like, what have I gotten into kind of thing. And we both noticed them at about the same time, and Deb and I gave each other a glance, and I smiled and said, now they're married, right? But you know, the truth is, if that same couple had been laughing, holding hands, connecting with one another physically, just kind of having a good time, I probably would have concluded they're dating, right? What is it that happens to marriages after a few months or years? Marriages usually begin with strong desire that draws this couple together, but sadly, it often ends in bickering and boredom. And here's the question we're going to ask today. Is there any way to rekindle love and romance when that hearth has grown cold? Well, some people would answer that question and say, no. No way. Once love has kind of died, once romance has grown cold, you might as well hang it up. There's no way you can get it back. But I'm going to submit to you today that not only can romance be rekindled, but I'm going to suggest that God can actually resurrect a marriage, even when you feel like love has died, if two people are willing to actually follow the will of God in their lives. But as always, the big question is how? Well, I think we need to begin by acknowledging today the potential for love to deteriorate. I mean, if you have a garden and you don't tend that garden, what's going to happen? It's going to deteriorate, right? If you have a building and you don't properly maintain it, it is going to decline in value. If you have a car and you don't give it proper care and maintenance, then that car is not going to function properly. And the same is true with our relationships. Any marriage that is neglected will deteriorate. Now, at this point, if you're taking notes, this would be a good place to kind of jump in and begin to write a word or two down and to jot down some thoughts. And let me just tell you, for those of you accustomed to taking notes, we often have Roman numerals, A, B, C's, 1, 2, 3s. While we don't have that today, I am going to highlight some principles, and there's going to be plenty of things for you to write down if that is helpful to you in learning. But the reason I want us to keep this up here for just a while is because I meet so many couples who seem to have the attitude, look, as long as we're not at war, everything's okay. So they feel there can be this benign neglect and the marriage will get along just fine. But I'm suggesting to you that neglect is not a neutral. Neglect is a negative. And just like a garden, just like a building, just like a car that's not properly maintained, it is going to decline and deteriorate. Neglect is a negative. So I think there's this tendency for us who've been married for a while just to kind of settle. We just kind of conclude, well, I guess it's just the way it is, and we settle for a mediocre marriage. We all know how that happens, right? Things get busy. Life is hard. It's hectic. It gets frenetic. And if children come along, oh my goodness, just crank up the intensity even more. And there's all kinds of bills to be paid, all kinds of events to go to, all kinds of boxes to check off of our to-do list. And before we know it, we're like ships passing in the night. Now, I believe it's a good thing when a marriage is healthy. I believe it's a good thing to be content in your marriage. But I've been praying all week long that God would stir up in husbands and wives a holy discontentment. I've been asking God to stir us up and help us not to settle for mediocrity. I want every husband, every wife to say today, we want God's best for us. If you're in a meaningful relationship with someone you're not married to, and it's turning romantic, I want you to be able to say the same thing. Whatever God's will for us may be, we want God's best for us in this relationship. And that's so important because I know through conversations over these last few weeks that a good number of you feel discouraged. Desire has turned to disappointment. Disappointment has moved on to discouragement, and in some cases, discouragement, if we're being honest, has led to despair, and you feel like just throwing in the towel and walking away. You're not sure you even want it anymore, and you just don't know what to do. The following letter was written by a wife, and it was given to her mother. And here's what this young wife wrote to her mom. Dear Mom, I'm trying hard to understand what's happened in my marriage. What I thought was a sure thing has fallen apart. And I'm starting to wonder if this is the man I was meant to marry. Maybe I've missed God's will, because being married isn't all what I thought it would be. I know that a lot of people have problems, but I was just sure things would be different for us. Before we got married, it seemed that we had so much in common. But now, it doesn't seem like we agree on anything. I feel ripped off. He feels the same way. Last night, he told me that he feels like he's the victim of a bait and switch scam. We're both bitter and angry and frustrated. Mom, do you think that maybe the person God wanted me to marry is still out there somewhere? Because I'm constantly comparing him to others, and I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I should just divorce and start searching again for my true soulmate. All I know, she writes, is that I'm deeply disappointed in my marriage, and I don't know what to do. But I do know I can't live like this. And that's precisely where a number of you are. You don't know what to do, but you do know that you can't live like this. I think, first of all, it's important for us to understand that when we got married, we entered, whether we realized it or not, whether we knew it or not, we entered into a spiritual battle. You see, marriage is not just some secular idea. It's not some mere human idea. It's sacred. Marriage was God's idea. And because it's God's idea, Satan, the enemy of your soul, the one who is bent on killing and stealing and trying to destroy your relationship, he will try to foul things up. Trust me. And so if you don't understand today that you're in a spiritual battle, then you're kind of a sitting duck, if you will, because you're in a war and you may not even realize it. A spiritual battle is going on. The popular Christian writer Max Lucado puts it like this. He says, Satan won't suddenly steal your home from you. He'll do something far worse. He'll paint it with a familiar coat of drabness. He'll replace the evening gowns with bathrobes and nights on the town with evenings in the recliner. And he'll substitute romance with routine. And he'll scatter the dust of yesterday over the wedding pictures in the hallway until they become a memory of another couple in another time. And I'm concerned that that has happened to some of you. Satan has ripped you off. Satan has stolen away romance and replaced it with routine. And your marriage just feels like a business. And passion and romance have gone. Listen, if that's you, or if you're just in one of those sort of okay marriages, maybe it's just a bit mediocre, nothing horrible, but it's just kind of there somewhere in the middle of mediocrity. I honestly believe God has a word for you from His Word today. I'm convinced God has a better future in mind for you. And I want you to have a holy discontentment. I want you to say today, we want God's best, even if it means we have to get out of our comfort zone a little bit. And so let's jump in and get started. If you have a Bible with you, or maybe you read Scripture these days off of a mobile app or something, I invite you to find a book in the Old Testament called Song of Solomon. We're going to go there. Sometimes it's called Song of Songs, same book. And we're going to peek in on what's happening with Solomon and his young bride, his wife. Now, we're going to pick it up in chapter 7, just a moment. But let me give you a little of the context. It seems that Solomon and his wife have gone through a rough season. Unfortunate words have been spoken. There's been hurt feelings, and selfishness and pride have set up residence in the home. Sound familiar? It happens, doesn't it? It happens in marriage. But now in chapter 7, it's a new beginning. It's a new day, and they're trying to reclaim their romance. And so Solomon starts romancing his wife, and she responds and romances him also. As we pick it up in verse 1, he's admiring her beauty. Oh, how beautiful your sandaled feet, O prince's daughter. Imagine that. He admires her feet. Can I paraphrase that for you? Oh, babe. Ooh, your feet look good in those shoes. Now, can I tell you something? I've been married for 26 years, and I've never voluntarily offered that information, okay? I think this is often. I really like how your feet look in those shoes. How beautiful are your sandaled feet, oh prince's daughter. Now, guys, I want you to try that line at home, okay? Try that line. Don't do it today. Wait a few weeks until it sounds original. But try that line sometime. Now, don't miss the point. What's he doing here? Get this now. You may want to write this down. He's noticing her. And one of the things that I am learning as a husband, notice I didn't say I've learned it because Debbie is here right now and she would know better. Okay? One of the things I'm learning as a husband is that one of the most romantic things I can do is just to notice my wife, especially notice the little things. So if you're taking notes, write this down, everyone. Write this down right now. Pay attention. Pay attention. Write that down. Pay attention. that's kind of where romance begins. But again, there's where I'm already in trouble because I'm not good at that. Debbie could rearrange the furniture in our house and I wouldn't notice. Seriously, she's done it before. She's done it. She's moved pictures on the wall. And a week later, I'll say, "Hon, it's something different in here." She'll go, "Dude, I rearranged all of this a week ago." And I'm that oblivious to those kinds of details. But I want to tell you something I'm learning about rekindling the fires of romance. Some aspects of romance do not come naturally. So if you're thinking, "Oh boy, if it's going to be, it just needs to be all natural." No, it requires learning some new stuff. It requires getting out of just the routine, out of what feels natural. It requires learning a new language of romance. Well, Solomon's doing great. So he goes on here in verse 1. "Your graceful legs are like jewels, the work of a craftsman's hands." Now, notice what he's doing. As you read through this, he's starting with her feet, and he just kind of goes up, and this gets really sexy here. He just kind of goes up her body, and he's trying to help her see herself through his eyes. That's another important thing in romance, because trust me, she doesn't see herself the way he sees her. Oh no. He's trying to get her to see herself through his eyes. Listen, when she got up that morning, she did not look in the mirror and go, "Ooh, these legs are like fine jewels, baby, like the work of a craftsman's hands." No, she didn't do that. She looked in the mirror and said, "I feel fat." That's what she said, right? Now listen, James Dobson, this awesome family counselor and therapist, he said after decades of working with married couples, after hundreds of focus groups, after dozens of books written and hundreds of messages given, he has learned one thing about women. It's also true of many men. It's not just a female thing. Most women, even beautiful women, struggle seriously with deep insecurity about body image. It's true. So Solomon is being brilliant here. He's being so romantic. He's helping build his wife up. He's helping her see herself the way he sees her. By the way, there's something marvelously biblical about that. In the book of 1 John, you remember what it says? We love God, and then it gives a reason. We love God because, you remember what it says? He first loved us. God loved us. He's lavishing his love on us, especially through the cross. And as we saw that amazing love that God was initiating, it just melted our hearts and we responded to that. That's kind of what's happening here. Solomon's really on a roll, man. He's doing great. And he goes on in verse 2. Your navel is a rounded goblet that never lacks blended wine. Your waist is a mound of wheat encircled by lilies. Now, personally, I think he went off the tracks right there. He was doing so great up to that moment. Guys, can I give you a tip here? When you're trying to admire your wife's beauty and compliment her, and you're talking about her waist, her hips, her midsection anyway, please don't call it a mound of wheat, okay? Just giving a little tip there. Those words should never be used together, ever, all right? Now, it's good that we can chuckle at this, but obviously, Solomon is using Hebraic poetic language. He's using these metaphors that are kind of hard to translate into our culture. But keep in mind, they're all meant to be a compliment. And so he's building her up. And so wives, I would just ask you, if we as husbands, try to compliment you and genuinely admire your beauty, we're just being very honest and authentic, and if we end up messing up our words and calling your stomach a mound of wheat, have mercy, okay? Just have mercy, because at least your husband's making an effort. In verse 6, he goes on, how beautiful you are and how pleasing, O love, with your delights. And he's just going on here. And I'm going to save some of the more intimate verses for you to go home and read. This makes great bedroom reading, folks, right here. This is great bedroom reading, the Song of Solomon. Not just this chapter, but the whole book is awesome. Now, here's what I find very interesting. As Solomon is putting himself out there, making himself vulnerable, initiating romance, guess what? And ladies, here where I'm going to ask you to write a word down, if you will. Those of you who are taking notes, would you write this word down? Here's what she was. She was responsive. She was responsive. And it's really an awesome thing, okay? He's initiating, he's kind of taking the lead on this. He's helping build an environment of security. He's admiring her and building, and she then is appropriately responsive. It's awesome. Can I tell you something I believe about couples? Many men don't kind of take a lead and initiate things because they say their wife isn't responsive. And many women aren't responsive because they say their husband isn't taking enough of a lead and kind of putting himself out there and being vulnerable. And so it becomes this vicious downward cycle where there's just not a lot going on, and it's kind of a catch-22. Let me say a very personal word to married couples right now. I hope God would give you a heart and ears to hear this. Nothing drives a man toward passivity more than rejection. Hey, conversely, can I say another word to you personally? Nothing drives a wife more toward passivity and unresponsiveness more than rejection. Somebody has to break out of the catch-22. Somebody has to get out of the vicious cycle and say, I'm going to begin it. And I urge you as husbands to do like Solomon here and lead the way and initiate and make yourself vulnerable. Verse 9, she responds and says, may the wine go straight to my lover, flowing gently over lips and teeth. Notice Solomon's wife doesn't just roll her eyes at his initiatives. She doesn't just turn away. She doesn't check her phone. She doesn't keep doing her lengthy to-do list around the house. She's responsive. He's made himself vulnerable, and now she responds in kind and with passion. Verse 10, I belong to my lover, and his desire is for me. The Hebrew word desire there is very, very vivid. It's the idea of consuming something. They're going, we're eating our fill of love here. We're drinking our fill of love together. She goes on in verse 11, come, my lover, let us go to the countryside. Let us spend the night in the villages. This is so cool because she's now getting creative. You want to spark romance in your relationship? Start getting creative. And so as he initiates, she then jumps onto this. She then begins to get creative, and she says, look, I've got somebody to care for the kids. I got somebody to watch the dog. Meet me at the Marriott, babe. I've reserved a room. That's what she's saying here. Let's make a rendezvous of this. Let's go out and get alone. Verse 12, let us go early to the vineyards to see if the vines have budded, if their blossoms have opened, and if the pomegranates are in bloom. There I will give you my love. Notice the suggestive nature of this. They're being playful with one another. You say, but Pastor, what's all this stuff about pomegranates and vineyards and blossoms? I know it doesn't easily translate, but all of this kind of fruit imagery is meant to be sexually stimulating. This is meant to be suggestive of their sexual love for one another. Couples often ask me to recommend resources, books, something that could help in their marriage, and I'm always glad to do so if I can. And there's a book that has become a classic since it first came out in the early 1990s. Many of you have read it. That's awesome. And if you've never read this book, you need to get it and read it. And if you have read it, it may be time to pick it up and read it again, by Gary Chapman, called The 5 Love Languages. Here's the premise of the book. This book that has sold multiple millions of copies. In fact, it has continued to sell more copies each year than the previous year. It's unbelievable. No book I know is like that. The idea is so powerful. Here's what it says. We each have our own way that's most natural for us of receiving love. And usually the way we most naturally give love is kind of that same way. And Chapman lists 5 ways in the book. One is encouraging words. A second is quality time. A third is acts of service. A fourth is physical touch. And then fifth are thoughtful gifts. And that's our love language. But here's the challenge in marriage. Often our mate's way of receiving and giving love, the way they do it most naturally, is usually different from ours. So here's what it requires. When you get married, you remember I told you, good romance requires you to do what doesn't feel easy and natural at times. We have to learn a whole new love language. And then we learn it and we speak it fluent. Let me ask you, do you know your spouse's love language? And are you speaking it on a regular basis? I find it interesting that in this chapter we're looking at today, Song of Solomon, chapter 7, there are at least 3 of these 5 love languages represented here. Obviously, physical touch is. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. But for the minutes we have left today, I'm going to suggest the 2 love languages that I believe are the X factors when it comes to rekindling romance in your relationship. In other words, if you today are sitting there going, you know what, we want God's best for us. We don't want to settle for mediocrity. We don't want to stick it out. We don't want to just make it through. We want God's best. We want our passion to be alive. We want the healthiest relationship we can have. I'm telling you, without quality time and words of encouragement, it's not going to happen. You're not going to have God's best. So let me just spend a few moments here as we wrap up talking to you about quality time and words of encouragement. And I'm going to end with a little homework challenge that I'm going to ask you to take home and work on this week. Quality time. It's obvious in this chapter that Solomon and his wife are intentionally, in spite of all the other things they could have been doing, they're intentionally carving out time for one another. Now, when it comes to quality time, I've found in my own life, and I'm just being very autobiographical here, if you don't mind, I've found there are 3 big challenges for me when it comes to quality time. And maybe some of you can relate to this. One is that I like to measure things. Are any of you like that? I'm just the kind of person that if I'm going to invest time in any project, in anything, I like to see measurable results, and the sooner the better, okay? So if I've got a couple of hours, I love to spend it on preparing a sermon. Because, you know, I can see, wow, I got 5 pages worked on, and with that, I got 5 pages. That is, I feel like I made progress today. Or if I've got a couple hours, I can do a chore around the house. I can mow the yard. Wow, I can see it made a difference, right? Relationships aren't like that. I can spend 2 hours with Debbie, and it is awesome. I have fun. I enjoy myself. We laugh, we cut up. But at the end of the 2 hours, where's the measurement? You can't necessarily measure anything. That's the way it is with all relationships. Instead, there's this cumulative effect over time. And it's only over time that you can see the quality of the relationship increasing, but that's frustrating to a person who always wants to see quick, measurable results. I hope that's understandable to you. Another thing that can frustrate quality time for you is is this whole reality that if you're like me, you like to be a problem solver, right? I'm kind of an analyst at heart. I like to look at thorny situations and come up with answers. And I like to pride myself that I can listen to a real conundrum, a real problem, and come up with a pretty quick answer. And so guess what? If you're like me, man or woman, doesn't matter. This is not just a male thing. When you get together with your spouse, you may find yourself, instead of just relating and connecting, you may find yourself wanting to fix things, right? Right? You ever done this? Well, let's talk about the problems and let's try to fix them. Or, I hope you don't do this, but even worse, you may try to fix your spouse, right? I'm going to try to correct. I'm going to try to fix things I see in you that aren't perfect, that aren't up to tabs, up to par. Ooh. Will you write something down for me? Please write this down in your notes. Write down these words. When it comes to quality time, the key is, here are the words: connect, don't correct. Connect, don't correct. That's not going to lead to quality time together. And a third challenge I've had with quality time is trying to figure out the difference between being present and being really present. Do you know what I mean? Proximity does not mean that you're truly present. For a long time, I prided myself, well, I'm here. I'm not off somewhere else working. I'm not off doing some hobby or something. I'm not fishing or hunting or doing some other thing. I'm here with my wife, with my kids, and I felt great about that. Well, wonderful. But are you really there? So often my mind was working on problems somewhere else. Problems in the church, a sermon I had to prepare, a message I had to give the next day or whatever. There's a difference between being present and being really present. So all of these things tend to frustrate quality time. It may be that some of us husbands need to say to our wives, honey, I am so sorry. I'm sorry for the times I tried to fix and correct you rather than love and listen and connect with you. You may need to have that conversation. Honey, I'm sorry for all the times that a ball game kept us from a meaningful conversation. I'm sorry for all the times that an open computer or a cell phone came between us. We really should have been relating and connecting. Honey, I want you to know that apart from Jesus Christ, you are the greatest treasure in my life, and I love you so much. And by the way, honey, let me also add, how beautiful are your sandaled feet. Get that in there, guys. Get that in. Okay? Make a note. Get that in. Quality time is essential if romance is going to flourish. But there are things that will try to sabotage that. But there's one final thing I just want to end on and talk to you a little bit about the importance of affirmation and encouraging words. Here's what I've discovered. Nothing kills feelings of romance more quickly than verbal rejection and criticism. And nothing breathes life into any relationship more quickly and more easily than verbal affirmation and encouragement. It's just true. By the way, if you do any Google search on marriage these days, if you do any research on marriage, you're going to quickly run across the name of the PhD, Dr. John Gottman. He and his wife have been the most respected authorities in marriage research over the last 20 years. It's just a fact. Their name is everywhere. Their work is famous. They've written tons of books. It's just good stuff. And here's the thing I like about it. The Gottmans are trying to take scientific analysis and apply it to marriage. They're trying to figure out what are some of the predictors of a relationship that's going to flourish and last versus a relationship that's going to struggle and maybe end sadly in divorce. And so they're studying all these behaviors, all these indicators. Here's what they found. I find this incredibly interesting. They found that couples who are happy and stay together, there's a ratio in the way they use words. They found that with those happy couples who are really, really lasting, there are 5 or less criticisms or negative comments out of every 100 comments. On the other hand, those couples that were constantly struggling and who ended in divorce, guess what? Their research found that there were 10 or more criticisms or negative comments out of every 100 comments. Now let me ask you, what would your ratio be? Maybe you need to check it out. You say, I'm not going to keep up with my ratio, I'm going to keep up with his ratio. I'll tell you right now. Let's see if he gets up to par on this. Well, don't miss the point. Your words really matter. Back in 2007, there was a neat book. I love the kernel principle in it. It's called The Carrot Principle. Some of you read it. It hit the business world like a bombshell. The Carrot Principle was done a study of over 200,000 people in the workplace. By the way, this has now been translated into over 20 languages. It's used all over the world. It's so simple. It's almost silly. It's so simple. But through over 200,000 people studied, they found that expressing appreciation and encouragement is, and I quote, the missing ingredient in the workplace. Is that simple? Just expressing they say in this book, if you want to totally transform the culture in your business, in your organization, in your school, and in your family, just start intentionally showing appreciation and encouragement, and it'll change the whole thing. So here's my homework challenge for you this week. Here's the challenge. At least once every day, I'm just going to speak life into my spouse. By the way, the Bible says that the tongue has the power of life and death. So that's where I get this. Just speak life. Just build them up. How am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to encourage and affirm him or her. One mom and dad were really struggling with their little daughter. She was going through the terrible twos. And she was cute as a button, but she was so strong-willed and difficult to handle. They felt like they always had to be on her case. And so over a year later, this was still happening, and the dad decided he would use a new tactic. And so for his daughter's 4th birthday, the dad took her out to lunch, just the two of them, just father, daughter. And he decided that he would affirm her and encourage her. And so he said, honey, your mom and I love you so much. We're so glad that you're our daughter. Oh, you're precious to us. You're so gifted. We love how good you are at speaking. We love the fact that your room is organized, and we can just hardly wait to see the woman that you become and all that God's going to do through your life. And he went on, thinking of everything he would say. And when he had finally said every positive thing he could think of, the dad then reached over to pick up his napkin. And at that point, his little 4-year-old daughter reached out and grabbed the back of her daddy's hand and said, "More, Daddy, more." You see, the truth is, folks, we just can't get enough encouragement. But some of you are saying, but Pastor, that doesn't come naturally for me. You need to understand, it's just not natural for me. I'm much better at pointing out where people are wrong. God help your spouse. Can you imagine what the Song of Solomon would be like if Solomon started off criticizing all the things that weren't perfect and talking about everywhere she fell short, and she did the same thing to him? It would be a disaster. Focus on the positive and turn down the criticism and turn up the encouragement this week. Can I tell you what's going to happen when you do that? Not only is your spouse going to feel differently, here's the kicker. Here's the kicker about it. When you practice that this week, every day, speaking life into your spouse, affirming and encouraging, you know what's going to happen? You're going to start feeling differently. Because you cannot focus on what's right, pure, positive, lovely, praiseworthy without it beginning to transform your whole attitude about the home. And here's what you're going to find. The more you see it, the more you see it. Here's what you're going to find. The more you see it, the more you see it. And the more you focus on the positive and what's good, the more you're going to see it. And the more you're going to want to focus on it, and it creates this wonderful flourishing of romance in the marriage. Oh, how I want that for you. Do not settle for mediocrity. Let God give you a holy discontent where you're not satisfied until you have God's very best in your relationship. Father, thank you for how you've given us the power of words to kind of speak life or death into situations. We can build up or tear down. May this week, Lord, we be lifters, builders, people who build our spouse up. And I pray that marriages would flourish and romance would come alive, and that we would not settle for mediocrity. May we seek your best, and may you be pleased and glorified and honored through it all. In Jesus' name, amen and amen.